Welcome to another edition of Tech Bites with Ron Nutter, your home for all things relating to smart home technology. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to manage NTP with your Peplink B One or B One 5G router. Hi, I'm Ron Nutter, and we're going to be working on this together. This content is available as an Amazon Flash briefing or podcast. Please go to techbiteswithronnutter.com for more information. For any items mentioned in this video, there are affiliate links in the description. If you click on these links, I will get a small commission, but that won't affect the price you pay for the item. If you want to get notified when new content is uploaded, please click on subscribe and enable notifications. Here's what we're going to be discussing in today's video, and that's how to manage NTP using the Peplink B One or B One 5G. Now, this will probably be applicable to the entire Peplink line and to varying degrees other routers. This shows you the kind of things that you're going to be able to do with it. First of all, we're going to talk about what is NTP, because some of you may not have heard of this. The next, we'll talk about enabling NTP in Peplink, then enabling the NTP settings in DHCP, and lastly, controlling NTP with the firewall rules. For those of you who haven't heard about NTP, and not everybody has, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview here. NTP stands for Network Time Protocol. And that's a fancy way of getting all the devices on the network to keep time. Now, depending on your industry, this can be a very critical component. I've had a bank at one point that was so concerned, they actually implemented this kind of solution because they wanted to make sure if a customer was at one teller workstation here and then went to a new accounts officer, that everything got time synced correctly. And they were concerned about it. They wanted it down to the second, if at all possible. So here's why we're going to control NTP. And this is going to be something that will be very handy to have. Now, normally, you're going to have a workstation on the network, and it's going to go to your firewall, and then somewhere out on the internet, it's going to go to an NTP server. Okay, that's the basics. Well, where it starts getting a little bit complicated is depending on the workstation or the application, it's going to go to the firewall, and it may go to yet another NTP server. Well, what happens when this NTP server goes offline? And they do happen occasionally. Does this workstation know how to go to this one? Basically, it's, as you scale it higher and higher, for 10 workstations, is this going to have that much of an impact? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on your business. But if you've got several hundred or several thousand devices, that's when you want to be able to do this kind of scaling with NTP. And it is very scalable. Okay, well, the first thing we've got to do to get this party started is get the NTP server up and running on Peplink. So we'll go down here, and we'll go to NTP server, and then we'll click Enable. That's all there is to it. And then once you've clicked on Save, click on Confirm, let it get restarted, and then we can go on to the next step. Now that we've got NTP enabled, we've got to make one of two decisions. Either we go out and manually configure every device, yeah, right, or we can get DHCP to do just about all of the work for us. So we will go down to Network. Now, in my case, it's Untitled VLAN because I'm just running just the one VLAN off this Peplink for the time being. So we'll click on that, and then we'll go down here to DHCP server. And what we're looking for is something called the DHCP option. Especially if you're using voice over IP, using a DHCP option is going to be something you're going to become very familiar with, because it's going to be a real time saver and work saver. Okay, so we'll click on Add, And we'll click on the drop-down box. Now we'll go to time servers. Now you have one of two choices. If we weren't going to use the Peplink as an NTP server, you could point to whatever external NTP servers you want. But the whole exercise we're looking at for this is we're trying to minimize network traffic, especially if you're on a metered connection, especially if you're on a slower speed connection, because the more workstations that you have behind the Peplink, the more this makes sense that you want to move forward with this. So what we'll do is we want to tell the workstations to go to 192.168.50.1 or whatever you've changed the LAN IP of your address to. You can specify more than one, but that's up to you, and then you can also specify the order. If you specify public NTP servers, you probably should use the host name, and here's why. A lot of the NTP providers that I've come across use circular DNS, or round-robin DNS is another way of looking at it, to where you go to the host name, and each time you go to the host name, it resolves to a different IP address. So there's some redundancy that they've built in, or some of them have built in, to where you can have the same host name out there, but you're actually going to different systems. That's getting into the weeds. For our purposes, we're going to go with the IP address of our box here, because we want to basically keep this inside. So we'll click on Save, and then our good old friend Confirm. Once it decides it's going to get all the change applied. Okay, that's it. We're done. So we'll go back here to Untitled VLAN and see time servers, and it's got that address. Make sure always that that's the case. Now, for this setting to take effect, you're going to have to either manually do a DHCP refresh on all your network devices, or just let them naturally age out and they'll pick it up over time. There's no right or wrong way to do that. Well, now that we've got NTP enabled and we've got DHCP passing out the NTP information, one caveat there: some devices will not accept it. They're not geared in their DHCP process to look for that information. So you may have some devices that this setting won't take on. And I'll show you how to handle that one. So what we'll first go do is we'll go down here to Advanced Access Rules. Now, to get a handle on what's going on, there's two rules we need to put in place. And these are going to be position sensitive. So basically, as you come up with some of these rules, you're going to have to reorder them a little bit so that they work right, because we want the default rule to be the rule of last resort. So on outbound access rules, and we're looking at for traffic going outbound from your network to the internet, the first thing we'll do is we'll set up a block NTP, because we want to get control. We want to keep all those devices that are chattering on NTP or talking on NTP to not be able to get to the outside world. Because if you're running on a small connection or one that's metered, you want to watch how much traffic is going out there. And depending on the device or application, it could be going out there as frequently as once a minute. It just depends on how things are configured. So what we'll do is we will go down here. First, in the protocol, there's two ways you can do NTP. You can do it with TCP or UDP. I would say just most of the ones I know about are on UDP, because if you start having network connectivity problems and you're doing TCP, it's going to start backing things up, or has the potential to back things up on the Peplink when it doesn't see that return connection coming through. And in protocol collection, we'll go down here and you will see NTP. That's all you have to select. Once you do that, it fills in the 1, 2, 3. Now, what we're looking at, we really don't care what's going out on the source. you'll see in a minute, we could really lock the rule down, but I try to, anytime I'm setting up rules, I try to have them impact as little as possible. In case something happens, it's easier to see what's going on. So we'll go down here to single port, because this is only operating on one port, and that's port 123. And we want the action of deny. Make sure you check the enable box, and I'm getting ready to show you why. So we'll click on save, and then apply changes, and then we'll go to status, event log, and go to firewall. What you're going to look for is, now that we've enabled the deny rule, and I know I've got some allowed ones in here, but that we'll explain in just a moment. What you'll look for is denied, and you will look for DPT, or destination port, of 123. That's going to tell you what device is not accepting the change or hasn't. I mean, you can try doing a restart, and then you'll have two choices. If it still is not picking up the information, you'll either need to talk to the vendor to see if you can get them to modify or update their firmware so that it will accept the NTP settings coming over from DHCP, or you're going to have to manually modify that device to use your internal NTP server. If that doesn't work, then you're going to have to go to the next step, and that's allowing NTP from that specific device to go out. So if we'll go back here to advanced, access rules. Now this is where I've got a device that's not accepting it, and you can tell quickly what the rule of what the action of the rule is, and that's a deny, and that's saying yes to allow it to pass. That's very straightforward once you get into it. So I've set up this other rule called permit. In this case, I said Apple NTP because I wanted to call it out for a specific device. Again, you go by here, UDP, and then you go down here, protocol selection, NTP, and it will do some of the setup for you. We're going to tell it, I've told it IP network, and here's why. Early on, I learned that it was talking to 17.253 and two different subnet ranges. Well, I don't like writing a lot of firewall rules, and the reason for this is the more rules you write that are very granular, the more overhead it's going to be for the Peplink or any particular firewall, and that's going to be something that you want to watch because that's adding to the processor overhead. So what I did is I found what was the common address range, 17.253. So I said, okay, what we'll do is we'll do a /16. You router jockeys understand where I'm going with this one. Basically, we're allowing one rule to cover two different ranges. So we're saying 255.255 is addressing this range here. So we're saying anything that has 17.253 is going to be covered by this rule. We're only going to talk about port 123 going outbound. We'll click allow and then enable. Now, you don't want to do event logging on everything. Again, that's going to add processor load. So we'll click save. We'll click apply changes. And this is where you've got to do a case of hurry up and wait. Once you have started modifying this rule here, then you'll go back to status, event log, firewall, and you're just going to have to watch this. I know with my Mac laptop that it's about a 15-minute interval, plus or minus, when it goes out and retries. So what you're looking for is allowed con. Oh, actually, allowed is what you're looking for. And this is connection LAN, so I've only got just the one network setting at this point. Now, when you see it denied, you'll look at that rule and see if it's coming from the same source, because that's going to be something that will tell you whether or not you need to do this or just look at it. Now, once you're comfortable with where the settings are and you've controlled it as much as you can hope to, then we'll go back into the access rules and then I would turn off the event logging, because that's a diagnostic piece that you don't want to leave turned on unless you just really like to see what the chattering that's going on. But that's not going to be something that, as a general rule, that you'll want to do. So as you see, it's pretty straightforward on setting up NTP and how you can suggest to the network devices that they use this. Some are going to be a little bullheaded and say, no, I don't think so, or just not say anything. Others will take the setting and go on. So this gives you one more way of controlling how much of your outbound or your internet connection is being used, especially if you happen to go to a backup connection and you get some devices that get rather chatty, that you can minimize how much of that bandwidth is being used. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will see videos on the screen that are similar to the one you just watched, or other content that YouTube thinks you might be interested in. If this video helps you or provides value, please click on that like button, thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click on subscribe and enable notifications. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.